Using your e-mountain bike at night is a great feeling, whether that be getting some night riding in at the trails or maybe commuting home from work. And part of the process is using a front light on your e-mountain bike. And the great thing about an e-bike is that you've got a whopping great big battery to power your lights. Yep, you can hardwire in a light that's going to be powered by your onboard battery, meaning you're never going to have flat batteries ever again. Pretty simple process. Today, I'm going to be showing you how. Now, all e-bike lights that are hardwired into your battery will come in a wide variety of options to suit the motor that you're fitting that light to. All the big names out there, such as Bosch, Bose, Shimano, Yamaha, etc., all have different fitments and are available in all those different ones when it comes to selecting that light. There's loads of different brands out there that currently offer e-mountain bike lights that wire into your battery. We have lights from Exposure, Hope Technology, Light and Motion and Design, plus many more, so there's plenty of options to light up your ride. Now, most of these lights will simply plug into a power port on your motor after feeding those wires down through the frame. Now, the motor that I'm going to be using today is the Shimano EP8 system, but most of the information in this video is going to be cross-relatable to other motor brands and, of course, the different lights that are out there. Now, the light that I'm using for today's video is the Magic Shine ME2000. Now, this thing is an e-bike specific light, pumps out 2000 lumens of power, costs £99 and is available to fit a wide variety of the different motors out there. I think it fits Bosch, Bose, Shimano and Yamaha, just different fitments on the end of this cable. Right, let's get this light fitted to this e-bike then. And before I start, I just want to mention that this job can be fairly simple on some bikes if you've got a removable battery. But if you've not got a removable battery or there's some more complex cable routing going on your bike, then it can be quite involved to fit these lights. But for me, this looks fairly simple and it is a straightforward job. But if it looks outside of your skill set, head down to your local bike shop and they'll fit it for you. Okay, first thing we're gonna do is turn that power off on the bike, then remove the battery out of this bike. Of course, it's gonna vary from brand to brand. It could be a bolt or it could be those keys that you're never gonna lose, are you? So we're just gonna insert the key into this bike, remove the outer battery cover and get that battery out of the way. And with the battery out of the way, we're going to get into the electrics of this bike. And on the Shimano EP8 motor, it's behind this little black cover. You've got 3 Phillips screws holding this on. And once you remove these can fall out and they're really small and can get lost easily. So just remove these, but take care as you remove each one. Once we've removed that cover, just put that up safe. Obviously, you've got the 3 little screws that hold that in place. Do not lose them. And you can actually see the power port from this motor. Now, this is where you're going to be screwing those wires into and just holding them in. So the next port of call is to find a cable which ideally comes down into this area. And of course, I've got my seat post dropper cable here. So I'm going to try and find that at the handlebar end and then trace that wire down and run my power cable alongside that one. Right, next up, we're going to unpack the cable that's going to power that light and run it inside of the frame. So I'm going to be using this left-hand port, threading that wire down, chasing my dropper seat post cable and actually zip tying that alongside that cable so it's nice and secure, running it all the way down to the power port. Then we're going to connect it up. Got that cable port removed from the frame and this has given us a really great entry point into the bike now, so getting that cable threaded in should be super simple. If you have got a really complex cable routing, you can of course use something like the magnetic kit from Park, which is going to guide your cables through by attaching it. But this looks fairly simple. I've got a very, very short run just to come to my battery exit, so aiming it in, just keeping some pressure on there. Easy as that, like straight out of the battery housing. And we can run it down to that motor area. And then we've got to get the cable out of the battery tunnel. And on this frame, there's a really nice port where this dropper cable comes out. So I'm going to run it alongside that. And then we're going to connect it up to the motor using those terminals. And obviously it can get quite dark in these battery terminals as well. So just get your torch in there if you can't see it. And there it is coming out of that down tube. It's time to connect it to that power port on the motor. And on the Shimano version, you've got a positive and a negative terminal on there with a plus and a minus. Now the red goes to the positive, the plus sign, and the black wire, well, that goes to the minus, the negative side. So we're going to do these with a screwdriver and get these connected. So these are just basic clamps that are going to clamp your wire onto the battery terminal itself, much like a car battery. So you just do those up, not crazy tight, just make sure there's a good connection. You can give them a little tug. We're not on about swinging on these things, but just make sure they're nice and secure. Same with that positive one as well. Then it's time to replace your motor cover. Now with the cabling, just make sure you're running into either the guides on the motor casing or you're running them internally on the frame. You just don't want any of those cables getting trapped or causing a big gap between your motor casing, letting water and stuff penetrate that area. So try and keep it clean and nice and tidy. Right, so that's all connected down at the motor. Now we've got to tidy up this battery area. Now I'm going to find the cables that are inside this frame already and just simply run some very small zip ties, run that wire alongside that, and then that battery will slot back into that frame as it did before. Whilst you're doing it, those zip ties, just make sure you're giving yourself as much space as possible for that battery to engage. So with these zip ties, I'm moving them up to the top of the tunnel and in turn, not restricting that battery at all by getting it back in. Then we're just trimming the excess of those zip ties off. Just be careful not to cut your fresh new light wire because that wouldn't be too good. Once you've got all that cabling routed in the frame, then it's time to refit your battery. Now, it might be a little bit tighter than it was before because you've introduced that wire in there. Just go careful with this one. Don't go forcing anything. Just make sure it's in there correctly. Once that's in, we can get to the exciting part. Right, then we're going to refit the cable guide to the frame. Now, you might have to modify it a little bit because, of course, you've introduced that new cable into your frame. Maybe drill it through or just a little Dremel in there might open that up enough to refit it and make it all looking nice and clean again. Right, so we've got the cable port back in. It's all looking nice and tidy. All we're going to do now is connect the male connector to the female one. And just make sure you've got enough cable length as well. Just think about when your bars turn, and obviously if you were to crash, if your bars were to spin around, I would say more length is better than a shorter length for this one. When it comes to fitting that main light unit to your handlebars, you might have to rejig some of your controls out of the way. For instance, my actual LCD display unit is going to be in the way of that bar mount. I don't want to mount it this side because that light beam is going to be thrown off. So I'm just going to slide this down a little bit next to my stem and mount the unit onto the front. In the kit that you get with Ealot, you're probably going to have a couple of different size shims for your handlebars, one for 31.8 bars and one for 35mm bars. Now this is a 35mm bar on there, so I'm going to need that skinny one for this. Clip that around there and then mount this light. When I put this clamp on, I'm going to be really careful if I have got any wires on my handlebars, I'm not trapping them underneath because when I tension that, it could potentially break that wire. So just be super aware of where you're running that clamp around onto your bars. Then just move your bars around, just make sure you've got nothing trapped underneath any brackets or any tight wires going anywhere. That's a little bit tight there, but that's freed that one off. All looking good. Right, time to see the proof in the pudding and get this thing connected. Right, now a really important part of when you come to turn those lights on is you go into the sub menu. You can see it says light here, so you cycle through using your plus minus buttons to it, select it, and just make sure that's turned to on, obviously not off because your light won't work. So just cycle that up using your plus and minus on, press your button, and then your light should be away. So there you go, a super simple way of illuminating your night rides on your e-mountain bike. Let us know whether you've gone for that hardwired option or whether you use some onboard lights to illuminate your night rides. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to us here on EMBN and get in the EMBN shop and check out all the latest new kit in there.